Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Well, afternoon here by us. We are from Raxus. I'm Siobhan, this is Ashley and Ron. And then on the other screen, you should be able to see Rolf from the University of the Free State. So we are going to be talking about the admissions processing for health science in campus solutions using the evaluation management system. Okay, I'm going to turn off the video and then we can carry on. Okay. Okay. Okay, so there's the presenters. Okay, so an overview of EMS. What is EMS? EMS is the evaluation management system, as I said previously, and it can be used right across campus solutions. It is not only for admissions. It is a delivered PeopleSoft functionality which requires no customizations to get up and running to suit your business's specific needs. Everything is done by configuration in the system. So although EMS is not only for admissions, for today's presentation, we are going to be focusing on that due to the fact that the implementation at the university was especially to determine a student's eligibility to study a certain course. So EMS can be linked to an application of a student, thus making each evaluation unique to an application. Over to you, Rolf.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to listen to us. I'm just going to give a bit of a background of the decisions made for this use of evaluation management. But just to give you guys an indication, for those that don't know where the University of Free State is, we're in a small city called Bloemfontein, right about in the middle of South Africa. So I hope you guys get the chance to visit South Africa. It's a wonderful country. But let me get back to the decision making. Up until now, the Faculty of Health Science has been somewhat independent in their selection management and how they handle the selection management at the UFS. And it was done on an external data set or a database that they hosted themselves. But due to some internal changes as well as technological changes, the decision was made to bring this process into PeopleSoft. And the benefits of that decision is it now centralizes our data. It also allows us to automate a lot of the selection processes, which used to be took intensive man hours to complete, and this would allow us to save a lot of time by automating these processes, as from selection management as well as offering the offers that we gave to the students. It also allows us to automate related processes such as communications and reporting. And because the data, because the original application data is in PeopleSoft, we now no longer have to export this data to an external database and get to keep it within PeopleSoft. Next slide. Okay, so one of the first decisions that was made is a document that describes this whole evaluation management systems. The importance of this document is because most of the time the evaluation management setup will be set up through a PeopleSoft specialist, and this document is then important to bridge the gap between the technical and the business requirements. This document is also important in cases where there is staff turnover and you don't want to be reliant on this one person that has this knowledge of how this process works, and when that person leaves, nobody's in a position to maintain this process. It also serves as a educational, or serves to enlighten other people if they're interested on how this process works. And you'll see from what Siobhan will now show you is how important this document is, because the Faculty of Health Science selection management and evaluation is quite complex. Siobhan, I will hand over you to demonstrate the document.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ruth. Okay, so I'm going to show you this example of the documentation that Raxus did, which encapsulates absolutely everything that is related to EMS at UFS. And the idea is that this document isn't just done once at the beginning of a project and then never touched again. The idea is that as requirements change, as rules change, the documentation is completely kept up to date at all times. Okay, so this is where we start, and I'm just going to briefly go through the document. So we have some overviews, and then each deliverable of the project is set out as either a delivered process or some development that needs to be done or configuration that would need to be done. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Report examples of how they used to look and how they're going to look, or how you want them to look in the future. And then I'm going to go right through to screenshots of things that are set up afterwards, queries that have to be written, the breakdown of the query, what we want each query to return is also in the document, each and every single query that needs to be written. In this way, you can always come back to the document and see what would happen. Then the first appendix to the documentation is the components matrix plan. Because EMS is very interlinked with one another, keeping this updated is very important because it will show you each plan, the requirements for that plan, and you can always refer back to this to see how something is supposed to be working. We also have a very big piece of the document here, which if I zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see we'll have each item which is going to be evaluated in the evaluation, how it works, what the different possible outcomes are of it, and so forth. So that's a lengthy piece of information. And then once again, just all the different degrees and their requirements when it comes to a more secondary school subject code and what you expect the student to obtain as a minimum. The second appendix is probably one of the most important appendices to this, and that's the formulas and calculation for selection. This document outlines every single component or part of information which will be evaluated and exactly how that is to be done. So for example, we start off the document with just a mock-up of a student with each of their subjects and what we expect them to have, and then we continue the document to show every rule or every business requirement that is relevant to the EMS selection. So for example, I'll stop at an easier section to show. So our students write a national benchmark test, and for example, here we would say, what is the rule for this to be calculated? And we take that example of the student and we physically do the calculation so that we can be sure of what to expect. Here is another one. So this was a big rule and we broke it up into smaller pieces like this so that each section can be worked out, calculated, and the result can be given to essentially in the end give you an overall mark which you expect to receive. In this way, you can make sure that everything is working correctly right at the end. So this is the type of document that you would do just before the time to make sure that everything is working correctly and as per the business's requirements. Okay, so that's documentation. So when we come to the rule requirements, this is a screenshot out of the documents as well that I just showed you. So when a calculation is supposed to be automatic, we write a rule for this, and the rule is written in the rules engine. And this is the important part to document because if somebody needs to understand from a business perspective what is going on, they would look at this, and somebody who's writing the rule would also need to look at this to understand what they should actually be doing. Right, so there are pros and cons to EMS. So the pros are that it is flexible and generic. As I said, it can be used right across campus solutions and not only for applications. So you can really, the world is your oyster when you're using EMS. No customizations are required when implementing this, and you don't necessarily need a developer to make changes to the business rules because of the config aspect of everything. It also, in the end, provides you with an overview, which I will show you later, of a student and how they were rated on each specific item. The cons are the evaluation can become quite large, like in our case with the Faculty of Health Science. It can become large and it takes not a very long time, but it is not instant to calculate the evaluation. Rating values are what your outcomes are, the outcomes you expect for each student, and there are some restrictions. Some of these restrictions are that you can't have a value of 0. You have to have a set of values if it's a manual component, so it's not a calculation being done. An administrator will physically enter a value. The values an administrator can enter are also only numbers. They can't enter free text there. And then lastly, you can't have decimal values in it. So those are the cons, which I think are quite few based on the pros of using it. I'm going to take you briefly through the configuration of EMS. So below are the steps that you would use to set up a general evaluation. So we start with documentation, once again, the most important part. Then we go to the academic plan, the evaluation code, the scheme, components, and rules. So we're going to go into each one of these steps now. So documentation, once again, very important. EMS can overlap with each other, and you would want documentation to make this simple for you. Then the academic plan. So how do we link a plan and the evaluation? Because you know a student wants to study something, so how are we going to link what they have said they want to study with the evaluation that gets done? So on the academic plan table, you can have your common attributes set up, and over here we have used this to say to EMS's process that for this plan, we are going to use this specific evaluation code. And that will then, through the process, create an evaluation specifically for that academic plan. So what is an evaluation code? An evaluation code basically says this is what we are linking, like I said, the plan to the evaluation. And as these are the two most important pages when setting up your evaluation code. You would give it a name and you will tell it, I'm linking you to a specific scheme. So scheme setup is the next slide, which I will show you. But before we get to that, you can also set up the default values or the status codes for the evaluation. You can have your valid status codes, which will say where in the process it is, and then your recommendation. So based on the student's evaluation, what does the system recommend happens to the student?